Hello, and welcome back. This video is about refactoring how the function library is accessing the managers. And a special thanks to all my supporters. Thank you for helping me help others. So as stated previously, calling the getAllActors of class is slow. The tooltip says this is a slow operation, use with caution, do not use every frame. So obviously we would not do that. Anyhow, let's correct that in this video. So the way that we're going to get around that design is that we're going to use our game mode to save the wave manager and the tower manager. So in our game mode, our BP game mode, in here we can just create two new variables, tower manager and a wave manager, obviously of types tower manager and wave manager. Now we could spawn the tower manager and wave manager in begin play here and then set those variables, and that's not a bad design. However, it's not compatible with how we've set things up currently with the managers, where the managers have some stuff in the level that they're using. For example, our wave manager has this, well, both of these values that are set in the level. We could refactor that and get ways around that, but for now we're going to leave that as is. So instead, what we need to do is in both of the managers, we need to set these variables in the game mode to themselves. So if we have our manager variables here, then the question becomes, how do we get to them from here? So for that, we're going to go into our function library. We're going to create a new function called getGameMode, not to be confused with getGameMode. That's not this function. In here, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to call getGameMode. So obviously we don't want a loop, so we're not calling this version. We're calling the version that's just based on Unreal. So when we do that, it might look a little different. If we had done this in weapon, it's just a pure function, no input, all good. But since we're doing it in a function library, it requires a world context object. A world context, which you may have seen in C++, is when you call getWorld. It's available effectively globally. And in this case, if we're going to call getGameMode, it wants the world context object. The function library doesn't have a world context object itself, which is why it's not the pure function and it looks like this instead. However, you can, for the most part, just ignore it. We can drag this out and call getWorldContext, but this will actually just happen inside here even if we don't do it, so we're just going to leave that out. The world context it is using is based on the actor that is calling getGameMode. So it will exist and it will be fine. So we can just use this function like the pure function normally. And basically what that means is we want to get our game mode and then we want to cast it to the BP version that we created. So once we've done that, we can then add a return node and we can drag in our game mode here. I'm just going to rename this to just game mode, no spaces. Now with the way that we've set things up, we've basically set our levels to use BP game mode. However, if at some point you were to have a level or something else like a menu system or whatever, which is a level that doesn't use BP game mode, then calling this would cast fail. In that case, we can just throw out a print statement just as a reminder. Failed to find BP game mode. Oops. In that case, we're also going to return, but with a null game node value. This is more or less just a reminder to tell you that you're calling the getGameMode function in a case where you're not actually using the BP game mode, so you may want to fix that. So with that set up, we can go into our wave manager And in our begin play, we're just going to call getGameMode. We're going to make sure that we're calling this version, the BPFL utility. That is giving us our BP game mode specifically, and then we can just call set wave manager. And for that, we'll be sending along self. If we then go into our tower manager, we can go in event graph. We're actually going to take this section here. I'm going to cut this. I'm going to create a new function, spawn towers. Paste that in here. And then call that from begin play. And similarly call the same as we have in the wave manager, get game mode from the function library, and use that to call set tower manager. And similarly, this is just a reference to self. And then back in our function library, in our get wave manager, we're going to get rid of our get all actors of class. So instead, we're going to call the get game mode. As you can see, when you call that function, because it wanted a world context, it also gives you the option of setting it here, which we're also not going to bother doing. That will pass along the world context from the actor that called get wave manager. So for this, we're going to delete all of this. We're using the game mode or the game mode blueprint to get our wave manager. And of course, make sure you're calling the correct version. And we can use this to call isValid, the function version, and we can just pass that along here and that here. And we'll just rename this output to wave manager. We're then going to take get wave manager, which is going to duplicate it. We'll call this get tower manager and change the type here to tower manager and the name to tower manager. And then of course this will become get tower manager from the game mode. So now when we call get wave manager, we're not calling get all actors of class, so much quicker. However, we are still just calling get game mode, and this being called every single check. This will work considerably faster than get all actors of class. However, another option would be in your find enemy here, instead of calling get wave manager, which is called every tech, you could also just call get wave manager in begin play, save that value, and then use the wave manager value in find enemy. I'm not going to do that, but that's how you do it, and that would also be more performant. So let's just make sure that everything is still working. We're facing the enemies, shooting at them, and there's no list of errors that pop up. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video and would like to see more, you know what to do. And if you would like to support this channel, watch these videos 2 weeks early, or just want to download the project files, you can do so through my Patreon linked below.